One, are we on the verge of a government shutdown now because of Senate Democrats? Why was Chuck Schumer once so open to cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in Social Security, and today says the devil is Elon Musk? A conversation with Congressman Ronny Jackson. Two, free speech. Have we violated the First Amendment by deporting someone who would call for the end of Western civilization? Or are we protecting the United States of America? Second take. Three, Sonny Hostin says BLM was the greatest civil rights era since the 1960s. Little Yachty said it was a scam. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio, 36 stations across this great United States of America, adding stations almost daily, but always on demand if you're listening on radio by subscribing at Apple or on Spotify. We'd love you to do so. We'd love you to give us a 5-star review if you think it's so deserved. We'd love you to leave a comment, whether or not that's on Spotify, Apple, or if you're listening live on Facebook or YouTube. Once you jump into the comments, once you become part of the show, not just an audience member passively watching, but an active participant in the Will Cain Show, we love to think of you as a member of the Willisha. We got a big show for you today. Joey Jones, my friend, is going to join us a little bit later. We're going to break down whether or not BLM was one of the greatest civil rights movement in American history or a full-on scam. That's what rapper Lil Yachty says. We also got to talk about condescension and ignorance. I don't know that they are absolutely tied at the hip, but there seems to be a strong correlation, at least when it comes to TV personalities, and maybe in your personal life, and maybe even among the Brooklyn Brunch crew, that ignorance and condescension go hand in hand. Let's break that down with Joey Jones. But let's get started with story number one. Congressman Ronny Jackson, originally from, as it turns out, Levelland, Texas. Were you raised? Tell me, give me a little color, Congressman, please, on your West Texas roots.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, most people don't know where Levelland's at, but I feel like you do. But it's 30 miles west of Lubbock. I was born and raised there, lived there until I moved away when I was, 21 or something. I went to school at Texas A&M for a couple of years and then went into the military. So, yeah, that's my home.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't know you had to spend 4 years in College Station. My apologies to you and your family. I do know Levelland, Congressman. I married into a family, long line of cotton farmers. And so...
that's all we have there is cotton and wool.
Let me tell you something. I don't think this is, Levelland, I know Levelland, so there's nothing about this that should sound fancy. But I did inherit, not through my family, but through my in-laws, a cotton farm outside of Levelland, just north of Levelland.
Oh, are you kidding me? You still have it?
Yeah, I still have it, man. I'm a cotton farmer.
Well, you got to come out
there. Farmer.
Yeah.
Which I have visited once, Congressman. Okay, so I went, and we were like, we got to see the farm. So we went out there, and I'm going to pull up my map, because it's actually a little dot on the map north of Levelland if we were trying to zero in on the city that is closest. But we met with the farmer. I think it was at, probably a Whataburger or a Dairy Queen in Levelland. And we went out to the farm. And out there, there's no fence line. It's like the Old West. It's the Southern Plains, and there's no point. Why would you build a fence? There's no point. So you can't tell where your farm ends and the next guy's begins. You might be able to tell by some differentiation in the crop or a small crop line separation, but you can stand in one spot and you can see, I don't know how many miles into the distance, because it's so flat and so unbroken by trees or topography.
Yeah, you can see forever. It used to be waist-high grass with nothing but buffaloes and some Comanche Indians, and that was all those out there.
I haven't done this, Congressman, and you and I are going to get to the news of the day, but I'm going to follow my own selfish curiosity. I've read, I don't know if you've ever read Empire of Sun or Moon by...
it's a great book. I've read it. It's awesome.
It's incredible. It's about the Comanche Nation.
Yeah.
And they talk about two things that fascinate me. One, a jumping off point of what you just said. It was an ocean of grass. Like when you, basically where I'm from, Sherman, which is at the Cross Timbers region of Texas, which is where, it's not where East Texas meets the plains. It's this transitional period between hardwoods into what ends up being the rolling and then flat southern plains of Texas. That was the fort line. That was like the eastern edge of the Comanche Empire. And that's where...
Called Comancheria, yeah.
Of Comancheria. And that's where a lot of people died. That's where Cynthia Ann Parker was kidnapped, you know.
Right.
And when you stood on that timberline, or you stood at that Cross Timbers region and looked west, Gwen described it as an ocean of grass. Like all it was this vast ocean of grass that was inhabited by hostile Comanche Indians. And in a way, it's kind of wild to think when the settlers pushed west, they almost arrived at the shore. Like that's the shore of America on dry land. And as you looked out at that waist-high grass, you know, and this is like oversimplifying it, but like sharks in the ocean, out there amidst the grass was the Comanches. And that was survival and battle.
It was dangerous. They were you know as well as I do, we'll read the book, they're the ISIS of the Indians at the time. I mean, they killed anyone who ventured into Comancheria. It didn't matter who you were, you know, whether you were white or Spanish or Mexican or other Indians. They slaughtered everybody that came into that region. So it was it was one of the last areas in the entire country to be settled.
And what I like about you describing it, and you're not alone, like Gwen does make a comparison between the clash of civilizations at that point, between the settlers and the Comanches, in that, you know, he describes it as a time warp. Like he doesn't make an argument that they were morally inferior in any genetic or cultural way, but rather if you had gone back in time and visited our ancestors, you would have seen the same level of brutality, you would have seen the same level of violence. What it was that civilization had progressed probably 1,000 years beyond that moment, and they were still in that moment of evolution. And he does compare it to like that clash of civilizations is not unlike the clash you see between Western civilization and ISIS.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Will, I grew up in Levelland, but I currently live in Amarillo, and I live on the edge of Palo Duro Canyon on the canyon rim, just literally on top of the spot where the last stand of the Quahatis, which were part of the Comanche Indians, and Quanah Parker made their last stand. That's where I live right now.
What? Okay, Congressman, we were supposed to be talking about a CR, but I love this more than talking about a CR. I told you I had two things I wanted to jump off of. One was that ocean of grass. The second was Palo Duro. Yeah. So I have never been to Palo Duro Canyon, and I want to go. And you're up in Amarillo now. So for those listening who aren't from Texas, don't understand this history, this is like taking all that flat land. And tell me if I'm wrong because I haven't been. It's not the Grand Canyon, but it's the second biggest, I think, to the Grand Canyon in the United States.
Yeah, it is.
And then it just deep cuts from that flat land deep into this canyon land. And that was where the Comanches made their last stand. That's where they always went to get away from the Rangers, get away from the Army. And I don't know, it's so odd that geographic thing exists out there amidst the flatlands. I want to see it.
It's awesome. You come see me, and I'll take you, and I'll show you all around. I'll show you great stuff out there. It's fun.
I'd love to. Okay, let's talk about the CR with Congressman Ronny Jackson. So it looks like Senate Democrats are going to not allow this House-passed continuing resolution to get through the Senate. You need 60 votes. Now, what's odd about this is, I know you voted for it, everybody but Thomas Massey did. Some people voted for it reluctantly, Congressman, because it does continue government spending.
Right.
And so it's a continuation of basically where we've been. It's not accomplishing anything significant when it comes to cuts like we've been looking at and advocating for with DOJ. And yet Democrats have a problem with this. They have a problem maintaining current spending levels in the Senate. So they're just going to say, what do they want? What stand are they making? We must increase government spending?
Yeah, I know. It doesn't make any sense. You know, I voted for it reluctantly as well. I'm not in favor of CRs. I don't like CRs. I think that, you know, that's not the way the government was designed to work. But in this particular case, it does freeze the spending. I even proposed at one point that we not call them a CR, not call it a CR this time, call it the DOJ pause, you know, so that we can just freeze where we're at right now and let DOJ continue to keep doing the work that they're doing while we get the appropriations bills put together and incorporate in statute some of the stuff that DOJ is doing, because we as members of Congress have to put everything that's happening in the executive branch right now and everything that DOJ is doing, we have to legislate and put that into statute, or else it's not going to matter, because, you know, next time the Democrats get the White House, they're just going to overturn everything. So we have to make it permanent. So that's what we're working on right now. The Democrats are in a bad spot. I mean, you know, I was reading today that if they shut the government down, then they open it up to let OMB go in and decide who's critical employee and who's not, and then that gives DOJ even more authority or more ability to get rid of more government employees. And, you know, to be honest with you, they're just clueless right now. The Democrats are. They don't have a leader. They have no situational awareness about what's happening right now. They think that the American people are upset that Elon Musk and Doge is going in and cutting thousands and thousands of government jobs and getting rid of some of this bureaucracy, while simultaneously the American people are applauding this. Go to my district. People are excited about what's happening in D.C. right now, and Elon Musk and President Trump and what they're doing for our country. I think the Democrats, they have to wake up.
Congressman, in your district, as we just pointed out, you have a lot of farmers.
I do.
Cotton farmers are a little south of Amarillo,
Yep.
but you have a lot of farmers. You got ranchers.
Yep.
Are they concerned? Because we hear this line a lot about, cutbacks in – because, look, if you and I are being real, we know this. The federal government does support the farming industry a lot with subsidies, even crop insurance, which is backed by the federal government in many of these cases. Are they – look, set aside Republican, Democrat. You have to at some point even set aside conservative and liberal. Every person in this society at some point is dependent upon the government. And I'm not even passing moral judgment. Like, we are not. And we are. We have Social Security. We have Medicare. We have a lot of programs that when it comes down to voting, people are like, but I need it. I may not like that the government does this, but I need my farm subsidy. How are your farmers reacting to these cuts?
Well, they're worried about it, too. They need a farm bill. We were supposed to do a farm bill the year before last, not even this last year. We didn't do it. It's been 2 years since we were supposed to pass a farm bill, which is a 5-year authorization. We haven't done that yet. So I'm hoping that if we get this CR done, that it gives us some time to get the farm bill done and get it properly done so we can take care of our farmers. And I think our farmers trust that we're going to do that. They're a little bit concerned about some of the tariffs right now, to be honest with you, because there's a lot of trade. I mean, they sell a lot of cotton overseas and, a lot of cattle. I have the number one, have more fed cattle than anywhere in the country in my district. So they're a little worried about that. But last time this happened, they stood with the president and they sucked it up and they took some of the pain, and the president made it up to him, and he's committed to doing that again. President Trump loves farmers and ranchers, and there may be some short-term pain and suffering, and I think my farmers and my ranchers in my district understand that, but they know this is a fight for the survival of this country and a fight for future generations, and they know that we have to make some changes. We cannot continue to do the things that we've been doing for the last 4 years, and they get it.
I want to talk about that fight for the future of the country. First of all, a guy who has become a friend, he's an executive here at Fox, he said something to me at the Super Bowl. He said, Will, talking about my new show, and we're trying to do something different on the show, and luckily it's working, and we have even bigger visions of how it's going to be different than regular cable news. He said to me, often when we talk, we start on third base, and the viewer needs to know how you got to third base. Like, what's the first and second base of this issue? And I want to do that for a second, just a second together. You brought up a CR, and you said we shouldn't be doing CRs, right? I don't want to take it for granted that the average listener and viewer today understands what a continuing resolution is versus the normal budgeting process. And you said, hey, we shouldn't be doing these CRs. I think a lot of people feel that way. Like, we should be spending annual spending budgets, passing annual spending. Explain to me the difference between a CR and putting a budget together and a spending bill.
Well, the way it's supposed to work is the House puts together a budget, the president puts together a budget, everybody comes up with a budget, they decide what the top line number is, how much money is going to be spent in every area, and then we do appropriations bills, and there's 12 of them, right? There's defense, and there's homeland, and and transportation. We have all these 12 appropriations bills, and the committees are supposed to get together and talk about what kind of spending is going to be in those appropriations bills. They put those together, they pass them out of committee, they send them to the floor of the House, then we vote on all 12 of the appropriations bills, and then that is actually how the money in the government is supposed to be spent. It's a process that's supposed to take place by September 30 of every year, but what happens every year since I've been here, we can't do that. We have not done that since I've been here.
Do you know how long it's been since we've done that?
I don't know. It's been a long time, but I've been here 5 years. It hasn't happened yet. And when you see a CR come up, it's just an indication that the government is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're not getting the job done, because the continuing resolution is just like you said, kicking the can down the road, sticking with last year's spending. I hate them because it really wastes a lot of money on the military front as well, because all of the new programs that we have, some of the legacy programs that we're supposed to cut, none of that stuff happens under a CR normally. And so you're basically wasting money on old programs and not spending the money on the new innovative programs that are going to keep us in the fight with China. And that stuff doesn't happen. So it's really bad, and that's just one example is defense. But what happens instead is we do the CR, and then you've heard this term too. This this is even an uglier term, the omnibus. So at the end of the year, they take all of those appropriations that we didn't go through proper order to get to. They cram them into one big bill called the omnibus that has all kinds of other garbage and wasteful spending in it, and they pass that the day before Christmas so that everybody can go home for the Christmas break. And that's how the government's been funded since I've been here. It's a horrible program. It's a horrible process. We're working hard in the Republican Party right now to fix that. Now that we have the House, the Senate, and the White House, we're going to fix that. It would be a lot easier, quite honest, if we had 60 seats in the Senate. That's a big problem for us right now because nothing passes in the Senate without 60 votes, and we have 53 Republicans there. But we're doing a pretty good job in the House. I've been surprised this time that we're keeping the Republican Party in the House together. It's a fight. I mean, President Trump has to get on the phone and twist arms every time a big vote comes up. But so far, he's been successful in making that happen, and we're sticking together. We're passing stuff out of the House. We need the Senate to help us out now. We need some of these centrist Democrats in the Senate who are going to be up for re-election next time to realize that the American people are done with this garbage. They want the government to function, and they need to get on board. They need to pass this CR. We need to get these appropriations bills passed. And then the Republicans, we need to get the reconciliation bill passed that will only need 50 votes in the Senate, but we have some special stuff we need to do in there. But we can do that without 60 votes in the Senate, and we better do that when the time comes.
Well, back to that idea of the future of the country is on the line. I'll share this. I woke up this morning. I saw this on Investopedia, and it was breaking down how we got to $36 trillion in debt and where it went through the various, not just presidencies, but major events, because it's sort of like how it spikes, Great Depression, Medicare,
COVID,
COVID, but the financial crisis of 2008, all this. And then you can see where it leaps and how it goes. And honestly, if we're being real, like a lot of it happened under Ronald Reagan. It took a huge jump under Ronald Reagan. But you also have to do this. It's not just the total figure. It's debt to GDP. Because like you and I or anybody at home, if you make more, you can borrow more. You can afford to borrow more. So that's why you bring GDP in. GDP is what we make, so we can borrow according to it. But see, put this up 2 days. This is the debt to GDP chart, and it goes back over time. And 2 days, it's a little far away from me to read. But so you see the big spike there. First of all, what year does that chart start? For those listening at home, this is a line graph going from what year to what year?
Starts in 1970 to 2020.
Okay, so 1970 to 2020. And debt to GDP for most of that, the first 2/3 of that timeline is under, 60%?
Under 40%.
Under 40%. Okay, so then it spikes. What year does it start to spike?
Starts to spike over 60% up top. 2015.
All right.
2010.
Most people point to 2009 as really the beginning of the big spike, but you peak at some point. I think it's 2020, Congressman, at 120% of GDP, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the whatever the World Bank or whoever looks at this stuff, the International Monetary Fund says if you're over 77%, you're in a dangerous spot, and we are, and we spike. This is like really a dangerous spot in terms of now debt to GDP.
Yeah, no, we have more going out than we have coming in right now. It's obviously unsustainable, and I don't even know. It's going to be painful to try to get us back to a reasonable level, but we're going to try our best to do it. This last year, Will, it was astonishing to me, but the interest that we pay on that debt this year exceeded our defense spending.
Right.
So we spend more money on the interest every year to pay off our debt than we do on defense spending.
And I think that,
now.
Congressman, it's $1 trillion in interest payments. And,
that's right.
And we're about, 900 and something on defense?
That's right. Yeah. So, there's no way to. I mean, can you imagine what we could do with all that money? We could take that money and we could double our defense spending, or spend it elsewhere. If we didn't have this massive debt
or tax
China.
less.
Yeah, or tax less, right? We could cut taxes. We could spend more on defense. We wouldn't be worried about China right now. China there would be no way China would even be thinking about ever contesting us. The debt is really destroying our country. It's making us weak.
Can I push you on one thing? Because you brought up defense several times. And, of course, we have a mutual friend, the Secretary of Defense.
Yep.
But Congressman, how much is enough on defense? And I say that in genuine curiosity, not as a debate point. Because I did see a chart the other day.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's 980. You probably know exact. But $980 billion annually on defense budget. The next closest, like you bring up China. Isn't China's defense budget like 250?
It is. It's a fraction of ours. But, they don't have to, the procurement and the process that we go through to buy our defense industrial base and the military and the way that we buy these new weapons and ships and stuff is totally broken. And so we're working on that right now, too, because 980 should be way more than we need, right? That should be more than enough. So we have to clean up the process. China's hard to compete with because of their labor cost and because their government and their private sector are essentially the same, and and they don't, they can do anything they want, and cost is not, they don't have to worry about some of the stuff that we have to worry about when we're trying to contract with these big defense, companies. But look, we got to fix that. We have more than enough money that's going into defense. I think Pete's going to do a great job of going in there. There's a lot of bureaucracy in the Department of Defense that's wasteful too. I think he's going to go in there. He's going to clean up all of this wasteful bureaucracy. We're going to redistribute some of the money that's available to us and put everything into making sure that we are a lethal fighting force. That's what he said over and over. And it's some of these legacy programs that are out there we're spending money on, they need to go away. One of the things I've been astonished with since I've been on the House Armed Services Committee is, some of these big defense contractors like Boeing and whatnot, they have some equity or some type of, established presence in every single district in all 435, districts that are represented by Congress pretty much. And so they can turn the screws on everybody. And so a lot of times we spend money on these legacy programs that we should have cut our losses on those and spent that money somewhere a long time ago. So right. I think that, the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee right now, Mike Rogers, is very interested in making sure we clean up that process. That's the focus of this year's National Defense Authorization Act is to clean up that process and start making sure that we are ready to fight the next fight with China. And we can't do that until we stop wasting money.
Okay, so last thing, I know you got to go here in just a moment or two. Yesterday, Congressman, on the 4 o'clock television version of the Will Cain Show, I made this economic moment in history comparison to 1980 to 1982 and Ronald Reagan. And the way that he was received at that time, the concern among pundits, economists, and world leaders about what was happening on the American economy. He made radical changes to tax policy and regulation. We got some of that going on as well right now. But everything you're talking about is radical. I mean, so radical that I maintain, I think, a healthy level of skepticism whether or not you're actually going to be able to do it. Yeah, like, are you going to be able to reform procurement in the Defense Department? But when you do radical things, there's a transition period. We're probably seeing some of that right now in the economy. It's not easy, and there's a price to pay. And in 1982, Ronald Reagan paid that price. They lost 26 seats in the House. They lost one seat in the Senate. The public was going through a rough economic period in the short term to try to get to long-term sustainability, which is what we're talking about, right? So the question is, what does this do? And politics aren't the most important thing, but they're part of it because it measures how long you can continue. Can you only do you have a year and a half? Do you have 2 years? Or can you actually work for 4 years? In order to work for 4 years, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan worked together. You had Democrats working with Ronald Reagan to continue on in that process. It doesn't seem like that's anywhere on the table of possibility for you. At one point, Chuck Schumer sounded like this when it came to Social Security and waste, fraud, and abuse.
About a third of all of the spending that's done in Medicare, Medicaid, I would imagine a lot of it's in the private sector as well, doesn't go to really good health care, goes to other things. And the real nub of this is how do we wring that waste out, that fraud, abuse, duplication, without interfering with the good care that we want every person on Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance to get.
He's talking about Medicare there, but he was concerned. And now he's not. Now he thinks Elon is doing the devil's work.
Yeah, it's crazy. We've talked about this. I'm on the Ag Committee as well, and we've talked about cleaning up the SNAP program because it's just billions and billions of dollars in fraud, stuff that's being stolen. Some of it's not even staying in this country. It's going overseas. Did you talking about that? The Democrats lose their mind, like you're trying to cut the program or cut what's available to the recipients. We're not. We're just trying to clean it up. We're trying to get rid of the waste so we can spend it elsewhere. The same thing with Medicare, Medicaid, all these programs. We could save billions and billions of dollars dollars. It would be trillions before we're over cleaning up these programs, but they will not concede to anything, even getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. So, they got to change things. But you're right. You're right to be skeptical. I don't know, how this is going to happen. We better approach this every single day, me and my Republican colleagues, like we have a year and a half left. I hope we have the full 4 years of the Trump administration, but we could lose the House in the midterms. When you're talking about the Reagan years, they had a much bigger margin back then. We have a 1 or 2 seat majority right now, so it's going to be really hard to keep the House potentially. So we should assume that we're going to lose the House in the midterms, and we should make sure everything that needs to be done gets done in the next year and a half. There's no time to mess around. We got to get it done now. And hopefully, the one good thing we got going for us is that Biden left such an absolute disaster that I think that even a year and a half down the road, there's still going to be a lot of good things that have happened. Things are going to be so much better in people's day-to-day lives because of the disaster that was left behind in the Biden administration, that hopefully we do keep the House, and we got another couple of years to go at this. But we're stupid if we don't act like we have a year and a half left and get it all done.
Really good. I will take you up on your invitation to come out there to West Texas and visit Palo Duro Canyon.
Looking forward to it.
We just got to get it on the schedule. Congressman Ronny Jackson, thank you so much.
Thank you, Will.
All right. There he goes. All right, let's take a quick break. We had a debate yesterday on the Will Cain Show. I thought it was a really incredible debate. It was Glenn Greenwald, who I think is a principled free speech fighter, against Brooke Goldstein, who argued that this Columbia protest organizer, Palestinian guy, does not, as a green card holder, have the First Amendment rights to maintain that green card. So is this a debate that we are violating our own foundations, free speech, in order to kick somebody out who said they want to end Western civilization? I'm going to share this with you. We're going to comment together. We're going to watch it, internalize it, and comment together coming up on The Will Cain Show. Sonny Hostin says BLM is the greatest civil rights movement since 1964. Lil Yachty says it's a scam. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe, if you would, please, at Spotify or on Apple. Coming up here today, don't go anywhere, because I think you're going to hear this debate between Glenn Greenwald and Brooke Goldstein on the First Amendment, but also saving Western civilization. Pink Wolf says on YouTube to Tinfoil Pat, but are the hosts actually reading the comments? I think we just answered that question, did we not, Pink Wolf? Make sure you jump into the comment section on YouTube or on Facebook. And again, we'll make you a member of the Willisha. A Willisha is a Will Cain version of a militia. A militia is a private army. It is a citizen-driven army.
That's what we are.
We are. A militia. Just lean into all the bad things they want to say. All the little things that set their tinglies off. It's a fun play on words. And it's also a sideways path to introducing my next guest, who was not in a militia, but the actual standing army. He was a Marine. But you're never a former Marine. You're always a Marine. It's Joey Jones. What's up, Joey?
That's right. Not much, man. I don't know. Calling me a soldier, that's like me calling you a Falcons fan or something. It would just be, or a Redskins fan. Almost a rivalry there. That's just terrible stuff there.
Soldier is only
the
Army. Yeah.
The Army.
Did I say soldier?
You know what that stands for?
Did I say soldier?
No, you said Army. You said part of the standing army.
Oh, I said part of the standing army. Standing military.
Yeah, I know. It's semantics, but it means everything to jarheads. Army means ain't ready to be Marines yet. So I thought I would say that so your comments would liven up a little bit.
Does any of your loyalty to the Marines flow at all? Like, give me a percentage basis, 0 to 100. Flow at all to the Navy?
Okay.
When Army plays Navy.
1 day a year. 1 day a year.
Is that the day?
Yeah.
Army,
and the only
Navy?
reason why, Army, Navy, and that's the only reason why is a lot of those cadets or midshipmen, will go be in the Marine Corps. So they go from the Naval Academy to be Marine Corps officers. So for that reason alone, and you have a lot of Marine instructors at the Naval Academy.
So for 1 day a year, you are.
That's it.
You feel emotional towards the Navy.
I fight this fight all the time. Everybody thinks because on the Marine Corps seal where it says Department of the Navy, they think that means the Marine Corps is a Department of the Navy. And not to nerd out, but really what that's talking about is under the Secretary of the Navy, you have two branches of service, Navy on one side, Marine on the other. So the Marine Corps is in the Department of the Navy. It's not a Department of the Navy. We're just using the word Navy two different ways. One as a branch of service and another as a Department of DOD.
Did your dad
there
serve?
You go. No, he should have. He was a brick and block mason, man. He very disciplined, worked hard. He set me up really well to be a Marine.
The reason I asked about your dad
I
is,
found it on my own.
that's what I was going to say. Wanted to see the path to the Marines.
Yeah.
Was, out of curiosity, Joey, was it a recruiter? Where did this...
No.
No?
Yeah. No, I'll tell you exactly what happened. My two best friends, one of them, his dad was a Marine and our school teacher and football coach, and he's real tough SOB. And the other one, our third best friend, his uncle was a Marine and his dad was career Air Force. So those two guys knew they would go to the military their whole lives. I came from moonshiners and roughnecks. Like, if my family was doing public service, it was in an orange jumpsuit on Sunday because they had too much fun.
The side of the highway?
Running moonshine on Saturday. Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, I've seen my dad pick up beer cans, you know. And so for me, I didn't want to leave a small town, but my two best friends talked me into it. We were all going to go. And then it just worked out that I went first. So they kind of got me on that one.
And that's why it was Marines, though, because they were focused on Marines?
We were all going to go to the Marine Corps. Chris went to college and went to the Marine Corps from college. Keith, the other guy, who was the most gung-ho, he failed the one test you can't fail before going to boot camp, which is peeing in a cup. So he had to wait a month, and then he ended up going to the Army. That's what they do, is they pass them back and forth. Like if you embarrass the Marine recruiter, he's going to take you down to the Army and vice versa.
That's interesting. I was curious how you, without familial inertia, in other words, like following in your dad's footsteps, how you went Marine Corps instead of Army or Navy, for that matter, or Air Force.
Yeah, it was easy for me. Nobody walks into a room. This is honest God's truth, and I'm not talking crap. You have a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. Each of the soldier, sailor, airmen, it's a 50-50 chance that I'm going to say, man, I was going to join the Marine Corps, but. You never hear a Marine say, I was going to join the Army, but. It just doesn't work that way. Interpret that how you may.
Okay. All right. Marine Joey Jones here with us on the Will Cain Show. Okay, I want you to listen to this, Joey. This is Sonny Hostin talking about not just BLM, but the fact that the BLM, it's not a monument. It was like a crossway. It was a crosswalk that was painted. It was a
mural.
A mural in honor of BLM has been taken down by the mayor of Washington, D.C. because she was going to be deprived federal funds. And this is Sonny Hostin talking about BLM.
I'm saddened by it because I do think that the Black Lives Matter movement has been co-opted and they're trying to erase it, obviously, but it's probably the second most important civil rights movement in American history. The first, of course, being which resulted in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and then the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So I'm devastated by it because it's just a continuation of the erasure of American history. Of course, I take it a little personally because one of my closest friends is Alicia Garza, who wrote the letter that started the Black Lives Matter movement, and she is one of our thought leaders.
The erasure of American history is a little rich. Yeah. I mean, that was like if you ranked BLM's top 5 priorities, like one of them of the top 5, I don't know if it was number 1, but it was, I'm going to say it was in the top 3, was the erasure of American history. Taking down every statue you don't like and every American figure who you've ever not liked has to disappear from the history books.
Yeah, I think you have to look at this a little bit with a magnifying glass, right? Like she's talking about the second most important civil rights movement in American history. I mean, I'm no woman, but I think suffrage is up there in the top 2, right? Like that's literally half the population getting the same rights as the other half. I feel like that's got to be top 2, right? Because that overlaps race and, I mean, gender's half the country, right? I mean, that to me, suffrage has got to be top 2. And then the civil rights movement has to be top 2. So she's already wrong. And as a woman, I just don't know how she could forget that. But we'll move on.
Shouldn't there be a protest by the trans movement at this point? Like, where do they rank? We need Sonny Hostin's top 5 in the current trans civil rights movement. Yeah. I mean, if you were depriving them of their identity, I don't know how high that ranks. But I would put the
ADA up there, American with Disabilities Act. It's the only way I get into a government building, is up the ramp. So maybe that's up there. I don't know. I guess we're all just selfish. Who am I to disparage Sonny Hostin's BLM movement as a but don't you have to have some consequence? Like, don't you have to have produced something to be a civil rights movement? Otherwise, isn't it just it's kind of mute, right? Like, what are the top 5 accomplishments of BLM, regardless of their priorities? Their number one accomplishment was to shame American corporations into giving a boatload of untraced money to people that enriched themselves.
Yes.
And maybe she's right. Maybe it was co-opted by those people.
Mansions.
Like, maybe that much of it's right. But that is the result. That is the largest result of it. I had 4-level seats to this. I was on the phone with Colin Kaepernick and tried to understand where he was coming from. And then he went on TV a couple of weeks later wearing pig socks and was it Castro or one of the Central American dictators wearing a shirt saying that I supported him calling cops pigs. I mean, it was pretty terrible.
Well, you've told me that probably in the back of an SUV on the way to some party where neither of us fit in.
Yeah, I know that party.
the call with Colin Kaepernick. Tell me about that. Like, how does that come together?
So there's a guy named Nate Boyer who was an Army Green
Nate.
Beret. He's got a really cool story.
Longhorn.
So yeah, he's a Texas guy. So he got out of the Army, I think, at 29. I don't think he played football at Texas until he was in his 30s.
Yeah, real quick, that story is awesome. Nate
Yeah.
was a Green Beret and afterwards played for the University of Texas Longhorns, special teamer, guy that ran out the American flag before every game under Mac Brown. And Nate's a great dude.
Yeah, he was a long snapper, played DB a little bit, but, little white guy. You're not going to get a whole lot of playing time at DB. And he ended up getting invited up to Seattle. He did all of preseason with them. They gave him a spot on the team, and then they had a wide receiver get hurt, and they had to bring in another one. But all that being said, Nate developed a little bit of fame and notoriety for being this guy that was a rookie in the NFL at 34 or something like that. And so anyway, when Colin Kaepernick first sat on the bench, Nate wrote him a letter, published it in the Military Times saying, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the message you're sending. I'm not in your shoes, so I don't know what you're talking about. I'm willing to listen if you're willing to stand. Colin invited him out to a game in San Francisco. I forgot who they were playing. And they went back and forth in the locker room before the game, and what they landed on was that Colin Kaepernick would kneel instead of sit. And Nate's mentality on that was kneeling, it shows some deliberate respect, right? You kneel when a player gets hurt. You kneel at certain moments. So it shows some posture. It shows observance of the national anthem, but also a protest. And had Colin Kaepernick really messaged it correctly, I think that would have landed in a much different way. Nate stood beside him with his hand over his heart, and Colin knelt. And I don't remember if he put his hand over his heart or not, but he showed some respect. And so after that, I reached out to Nate and said, hey, man, I have this platform. I appreciate what's happening there. I've got this friend, Benjamin Watson, that I've talked to about this that's in the NFL. He has a different perspective, but I've talked to him. I'd love to get on the phone and help, like maybe get Colin back to standing. And Colin entertained a phone call with us. There was another player. I don't want to say his name because I'm afraid I'll get it wrong. There was another player from the 49ers on there.
Eric Reed, probably.
We had this great call.
Eric Reed?
That's Eric Reed, who I believe it was, but I asked Nate the other day, he's like, was that Eric Reed? And he said, I can't remember, and I just don't want to say it if it isn't fact.
Okay.
But that's who I think it was. And afterwards, we really thought we might do this like fireside chat and really talk about let America see Colin and Eric respond to us, why this is important and why having reverence for that flag and anthem in spite of our country's difficulties or flaws that is the game, right? That is what matters. And we had this great call, and then like a week later, Colin's on there saying all these inflammatory things and goes, and Nate Boyer and Joey Jones supports me in this. And it's like, no, bro, I do not. I do not support wearing pig socks and police uniforms. I do not support wearing Castro, or I forgot it's the other guy, Che Guevara, one of those two on his shirt. And he just went down this very negative path. And I told Nate, I said, look, all this dude's doing is drawing a line in the sand and daring people to step over it. He's creating sides on an issue that really should be more about a conversation. And so I obviously was very adamant and loud about my opposition to where he took it.
Whether or not Colin Kaepernick had earnest beliefs in the beginning, he quickly allowed that, I think. This is Will Cain talking, but I think to morph into, if not self-enrichment, self-aggrandizement. And so, it became about Colin. It was a cult about Colin. Yeah. And I think because of that, he becomes pretty emblematic of to take this back full circle, to to BLM. I mean, the BLM's accomplishments were to buy mansions. And it becomes inescapable at some point that it was just, I mean, Little Yachty, by the way. Can I name a Little Yachty song? Do I know one, two-a-days?
I highly doubt it.
What's Little Yachty's biggest hit?
Let's see.
Do you know one, Joey?
I barely know the name Little Yachty.
But I know the name. Same.
I
know he's a thing.
You could put Lil in front of any word, and I'd think it was a rapper.
The funny thing is, Joey, like I definitely have heard of Lil Yachty, but if you said, "Hey, Will," if James came and said, "Will, do you listen to Lil Joey?" I'd be like, "No, but I think I've heard of him. I think I've heard of him." Because you're right. You put Lil in front of everything, you're like, "Oh, he's famous. Oh, he's a famous rapper. His name's Lil Bob."
Flex Up.
Flex Up.
Yeah, that's his biggest one. Or Gucci Flip Flops.
Gucci Flip Flops.
Yeah, that's a big one apparently.
Okay, don't ring a bell. But Lil Yachty was
I can't wear flip flops. So
Lil Yachty was on a cooking show with somebody else I've never heard of, but it must be a thing. And BLM came up. Watch.
BLM? Since you want to be so black power?
BLM is a scam.
Clip that! Send it to the fucking news.
BLM was literally a scam. They had bought mansions, and you probably wouldn't know anything about it because you don't care about black people. You don't follow black
I do care about black people.
No. The name of that show is Cooking with Starving Celebs?
Feeding starving celebrities.
Feeding Starving Celebrities.
Yes.
Okay, so the host is
On
black,
YouTube.
Lil Yachty's black, and he says, "You don't care about black people." And then she goes, you cut the clip off for some of the gold, but she pointed to her skin and goes, "I obviously care about black people. I'm chocolate." And he's like, he said it's a disguise. He said that she said Lil Yachty said that's a disguise. And then she starts pointing out, "Oh, you cut it off because you know what he said after that?" Then he goes, "If you care about black people, why is your entire staff white?" He looks around at all the cameramen and everybody in the room, and she goes, "They're not white." You know, something like, "I support minorities." And then you could hear one of the producers or cameramen in the background goes, "I'm gay." And then he goes, and Lil Yachty goes,
I can play the full audio.
Lil Yachty goes, "I have a gay."
Do you want to hear
You
it?
know, like, he's like, "What are we doing here?"
BLM was literally a scam. They had bought mansions, and you probably wouldn't know anything about it because you don't care about black people. You don't follow black
I do care about black people. Look at my chocolate. You're mad.
It's a disguise.
You're mad. I think I'm literally the most pro-black person in this room.
Because you have an all-white staff?
Oh, look at his
They're not
eyes.
white. They're POC. Thank you. But don't laugh.
I do have a gay, so I also am.
Gay?
Lil Yachty does not give an F. He's gonna say whatever he has to say. He's anti-woke, Joey.
That's what's funny about this is there's Black Lives Matter, the organization, and a lot of people want to make that distinction, Black Lives Matter, the organization versus Black Lives Matter, the movement. But the movement was started under false pretense. The movement was started with Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, when Michael Brown charged a cop to attack him after a cop was responding to Michael Brown attacking someone else, and the cop used his lawful self-defense to stop Michael Brown from attacking him. And the whole hands up, don't shoot. So the entire movement was under this pretense that cops are out there just killing black men left and right, which is both factually and statistically not true, but even on given examples. There are some that were. I believe it's Philando Castile. That's real sketchy. There's a young woman that was killed in her apartment just because the cop went to the wrong apartment. There are absolutely some cases to where people are killed. But to link the race into it, what happened here, I believe it was Officer Roth was his last name, here in Atlanta at a drive-thru, to make it about race, you would need some factual evidence, and almost every time that falls apart. There are instances where cops aren't well trained, they overreact, they get scared when they shouldn't, and it's a tough job, but you're not you're not allowed to. You don't get to make mistakes. There are instances where cops go to jail for unlawfully using their weapon. But you need to be able to prove it's about race to even have this movement, and it's simply not true.
And even you doing that, like, I think I disagree with your characterization on Breonna Taylor, which is, but the thing about it is, but I don't disagree because I can't do it, Joey, right now. I can't. I believe they had a search warrant for the right house, and her boyfriend started shooting, and that's why they were returned. But the point is, you know what though, Joey? The point isn't
there's more than one instance, I believe.
And the point is that you and I, it's not. the facts matter. And I don't have all the facts at hand in this moment, but given the time in talking about these, when I was talking about it, I knew those facts cold. I knew the facts cold on Bubba Wallace. I knew the facts, which isn't obviously a cop shooting, but the facts matter in all. When the public story is just simply race, all the facts are washed away. And you have to, in that moment, and it's a heated moment, you go, no, okay, hold on. Let me look at the facts of Michael Brown, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ma'Khia Bryant, Philando Castile. You have to look at the facts of all of them. And by the way, I just don't have all of those accessible in my memory at any given moment to be able to do it. I have a lot, but it deserves fidelity that you know the facts cold. And then when all the facts fail, then maybe you can get down to race. But it can't be your knee-jerk top-line headline in the New York Times. You just can't. That's not journalism. Journalism is supposed to be caring about the facts.
No, absolutely. And the thing is, here's the deal. I don't roll around with a rebel flag on the back of my truck. I don't present myself as someone who habitually breaks the law. Those are two things that kind of like, I'm thinking race, but I'm just thinking of basically what I'm thinking of is that quintessential, not redneck, because some people see that as a term of endearment, but like white trash figure that I can think of in my community, missing teeth because they've been on meth, doing nefarious things, not real smart. And when a cop sees that, he's on high alert as soon as he sees that because he's seen that 100 times, and 99 of those 100 times, that presentation comes with search warrants, domestic violence, drug use, unlawfully possessing a weapon, and a whole rap sheet of stuff. And so the thing is, you're asking these cops to walk into a situation that 99 times out of 100 is bad for them, but to give the benefit of the doubt. And that's what they're supposed to do. That is their job, and it's a tough job. But to make that all about race rather than all these context clues of someone wearing a certain color bandana, using certain language, like if it's hateful or what have you, even the music they're listening to and the lyrics of the song they're listening to in that moment, you're asking every single cop in this country to ignore those things, which is what they're supposed to do. But as a human being, can you? And that is the real conversation we should have been having. Are police trained correctly? Is everyone that wears a badge someone that should be wearing a badge? And then on top of that, are we as citizens taking responsibility for ourselves to make every interaction with police officers safe and easy? I mean, if I get pulled over, my hands go out the window. Right. If I have a loaded gun in the car, I declare it when they get there. I'm not afraid of my life, but I'm afraid of him or her getting afraid of their life.
Right.
And everyone should have that responsibility. It's part of living in a free country where you can arm yourself.
I may have told you this. Do you know the origin of the term redneck?
I would imagine it has to do with your neck turning red, but I don't know.
That's what everybody thinks.
No.
Because you're a manual laborer, you work out in the sun, your neck turns red. No, it goes back to the coal mines in Appalachia. And you think I'm wrong? Why are you shaking your head?
No,
you just have the weirdest knowledge. Like the most random knowledge. You just search it out. I love it.
Well, this is because I read Demon Copperhead. And you said you read it. Did you read it?
Halfway through. It's a little slow.
Okay, you quit on Demon Copperhead.
I did.
That's a real mark on your character. But I think I learned this starting in Demon Copperhead, but maybe I Wikipedia rabbit holed from there and learning about. I got real interested in those ethnic minorities that no one ever hears about, like the Melungeons. Donald Trump's heard of them because he's talked about the Lumbees. He's made them a federally recognized tribe. But these are real interesting little niche ethnic groups in America. But in that rabbit hole, I found out it's the federal government was called in to put down a coal mine strike, Joey, somewhere in Appalachia. Because you had the coal towns, everything supported the mine, the town, the workers, everybody. And in some of those instances, the coal mining company owned everything in town, right? So if you
you wouldn't get paid in dollars, you'd get paid in credits that you'd have to use at the store the coal mine owned.
Exactly. So if you went on strike, it was a big deal back in those days.
Yeah.
So they called in the Army. And the Army came in to quell this strike, and the coal miners and the factory people and the townspeople who wanted to continue to resist basically started a guerrilla war. I mean, in the mountains against the Army, but they weren't regulars. They didn't have uniforms, so they wore red scarves. They wore red scarves to signify to each other who they were, and I think that's where the term redneck originates. I'm pretty sure. I'm going to put my confidence level at 85% on that. You can fact check me 2 days. While
You've
you're
at least read that somewhere.
So while you're doing that, see if you can push this button. I want to play for Joey Abby Phillips on CNN.
You know, this seems to be kind of also another litmus test for how to be in MAGA world. I mean, is this the new reality for this MAGA era of politicians, that they don't back down when they're confronted with facts? It's clear as day. The FBI put out statistics. Crime is going down. You don't have to twist the facts.
The FBI quietly comes out with this new data that shows actually violent crime is up 4.5% during that time frame.
Keep going 2 days. Play part 2.
The only person making an accusation that people are not getting what they've asked for is Trump, falsely claiming that the administration is withholding resources because of political affiliation. That is just not true.
Well, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is facing major backlash after confirming reports that a supervisor ordered disaster relief workers to avoid homes with Trump yard signs.
There's actually not any evidence linking any of Hunter Biden's wrongdoings to Joe Biden. You are incorrect. You think that Biden would actually pardon Hunter Biden, despite him saying pretty...
Yes, as a father, he would.
No.
He's going to get pardoned by his dad. There's no question about that.
The president has ruled out pardoning his son.
Breaking news. President Biden has just pardoned his son.
All right, Joey, that montage shows you, and I don't expect everybody to know who she is. Abby Phillips is a host on CNN that you most likely have only ever seen, because just being real here, like 300,000 people watch CNN, which isn't very much. And they, it's that show that Scott Jennings is usually slapping somebody down on. That's where you would have seen her. And she managed to do something, Joey, that I thought was worth commentary on. Combine ignorance and condescension into one beautifully wrapped big bill, one package.
Yeah.
And it's a common human trait, to be honest, but she personifies it pretty good. Like, consistently wrong, never in doubt. And James, you put it really well. She sounds like when she's talking to Scott Jennings, what'd you say?
She sounds like that 10th grade English teacher that has a couple boys in her class who she knows they're smart, but still thinks that, like, they need some direction and she knows the world better than them.
Yeah.
So she talks down, very much talks down while being wrong, Joey.
Yeah, you know, two things in life get me in a bad spot. When somebody imposes their will on me driving and when somebody talks down to me. Like, basically, if you verbally or physically back me in a corner, I'm coming out swinging. So hats off to Scott Jennings, I guess, because you can't talk to me like that. You know, my drill instructor could talk to me like that, and my dad could have if he chose to, and he never did. And they're gone. Like, my dad's dead, and my drill instructor's retired. I can't stand it. You know, it's not even a pride thing. It's a how do you respond to that? Really, what you feel almost like helpless because you can't.
Joey,
respond
because
to that.
the implication is you're stupid.
That.
The implication, the unsaid thing that's in that tone of voice is how stupid you are. Man, I used to say this all the time. Yeah. I only ever got super heated on First Take when I got that tone, when somebody gave me that tone. Stephen A. doing Stephen A. things and telling me that I'm wrong and being, you know, how he is, very performative.
Over the top.
Doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me. In fact, you know, he could say any number of things to me about how stupid what I had to say was. Doesn't bother me. Doesn't bother me. It is that one form of, you are so dumb, but I'm not going to say it. It's in my voice. And by the way, Abby Phillips isn't the only one. Like, there's actually, most of the time, that entire panel is that way on CNN. You know what I mean? It's actually sort of like, in your head, if you think of a tone, and you associate that tone to a channel, that's the tone you associate to that channel. I'm willing to be self-aware. What is our tone? And I hope mine's different. I do. I hope mine's different just because I want mine to be me. Just me. That's all I want it to be. But, you know, you can associate tones to things that you hear, and they are tonally condescending. By the way, what is MSNBC's tone? It's not condescension as much as insanity.
Wine drunk?
Yeah.
Wine drunk insanity? Yeah. What do you think, Joey?
Well, I think it's something we've acknowledged about the left for a long time. And, you know, I'm all about, like in the Marine Corps, if I'm going to inspect your uniform, I'm going to wear that same uniform, and I better not have what's wrong with mine when I'm pointing it out with yours. So when you first started playing those clips, it's like my mind goes to, How do we on the right stop ourselves from doing the same thing? It sounded pretty easy. Like Joe Biden said he wasn't going to pardon Hunter Biden. Of course I'm going to go on TV and say there's no way, and then it happens. And so with someone like President Trump, who is very malleable, and I think that's the most graceful way to say it. He is a malleable guy. He said this recently. We're talking about tariffs. He's got room to move. And so when he says something like, we're going to take all the troops out of Afghanistan, I know to interpret that to mean we're going to stop trying to win a war in Afghanistan, and if we leave some guys there or gals there because we need to, that's okay. In his mind, it's still taking all the troops out, all the combat troops out. This hyperbole that he speaks in, I know how to interpret it, but I don't expect someone that watches MSNBC or CNN, no matter how few of them there are, to interpret that. So a lot of the attacks on Donald Trump are when people take him literally when he is not, he's playing in this gray area even with his words. And so one of the hardest things in your job and my job is to be able to acknowledge our own opinion and our own bias in it, but also try to shoot it straight and try to say, okay, that's what he says he's going to do, but it's not going to be easy to do it, and we might see some other version of that come to fruition. And so when I hear somebody sit there and speak so matter-of-factly and so arrogantly about a politician, in my mind I'm thinking, what is wrong with you? There isn't a politician up there that I would carry the water for that hard and heavy, because they can change tomorrow, and they do, and they always have a justification for it. We used to use the term flip-flopper until they all were flip-floppers, and it doesn't matter anymore. But then the graceful side of that is sometimes as a politician, you learn more about this issue. Sometimes as a politician, the bet you made doesn't pay off. And I really want to give props to the ones that do change their mind, are honest about it. We just really hadn't had one since probably JFK.
You kind of raised your finger when I was talking a moment ago about our tone at Fox. Were you going to tell me what you think it is?
Yeah.
Like, what is our tone?
I think the best example is to watch The Five. Every time I go on The Five, I hear people gripe and complain about Jessica Tarlov. But the truth is, whether it's Harold or Jessica, Piers when he's on, or Geraldo when he was on, Geraldo's a little bit different. But those first three I named, there are moments where they win the argument. Maybe it's just on this one fact with Jesse or Greg, or maybe it's on something that they're bringing on top. And you don't see everyone around the table like lose their mind. Their hair's on fire. You're hateful. You're a terrible person. When you watch that show with Scott Jennings and that's all you saw, and you believed everything everyone else was saying, you think Scott Jennings is the devil reincarnate. You think he is the worst person in the world. I mean, it's direct personal
Poor
attack
Scott.
half
I
the
think
time
he's
on
aging.
there.
I think this whole thing has taken a toll. I remember the Levitard show used to talk about Max Kellerman was turning gray. Were you laughing about this? You already know what I'm talking about 2 days. That Max grayed over his 2 or 3 years on First Take because of just the constant fire blast of Stephen A. takes in his face. So it was like washing him out. He's losing skin color and hair color. I think that might be happening to Scott. Like these clips I'm seeing over time.
I'm sure it is.
I think it's like starting to wear on. I'm not trying to insult Scott, but he looks a little tired, and as one might be, of that constant fire hose of condescension. All right, 2 days. You have an update. Was I 85% right on rednecks?
The internet is trending towards you being correct, but if you Google just redneck, it says from the idea of the back of the neck being sunburned from outdoor work. So that's just Google. But then where did redneck come from? Slate.com, all these other websites say the term redneck derived from members of labor unions in the coal industry who wore red bandanas to signify their loyalty.
Boom. That sounds like 100%.
But
not
then,
85.
then they're saying on Reddit, the etymology of redneck is laborers, outdoorsmen. It was used to spread fear of communist militants.
Oh, this is bullshit. That's Reddit. What are we doing? You just grabbing every random thing you see.
I'm trying to
I don't like that the support you gave me was Slate. I wish you could have come up with something better than Slate. But I'm now increased my confidence level to 95%.
No, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Joey. So you can't be a redneck. Sorry. You didn't participate in the labor union uprising in the coal mines until that happened.
Yeah, I'm good with country. I'm even good with hillbilly. Those are the terms of endearment with derogatory nature that I'm good with.
I'm not a hillbilly. Never been. I'm not a redneck. Never been an outdoor laborer, even if we assign that meaning to it. I've thought about that, Joey. Like, I think country is fair for me. I grew up in a town of 30,000 people that was rural, not a suburb. I think that qualifies as country. Small town at the very least. Small town guy.
Yeah.
But not a cowboy. Don't pretend to be. Dress like one, not a cowboy. Played like a cowboy for a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to think like, it's like you and I both know, don't fake it. So pick the right one. What are you?
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? Like, what,
That's right.
pick the
That's
right
right.
word here. What are you? Because I don't want to be around a bunch of cowboys pretending like I'm a cowboy. That doesn't feel good.
No, cowboys. It starts when you start walking. I mean, to be a cowboy, it's a lifestyle. You can know how to ride a horse and rope, and I'll wear a pearl snap from time to time, but no, that ain't me.
All right.
I respect it, but I didn't do it.
Country Hillbilly Marine Joey Jones. Always good to have you on the Will Cain Show.
There we
Thanks,
go.
man.
Thanks, brother.
All right, there he goes. Okay, don't go anywhere. I mean, it's a long show today. I don't mind it. I think sometimes the longer the show goes, it means it's the better it is that day. And we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want you to hear this debate. I think this debate is everything on First Amendment issues versus deporting people that hate Western civilization. Next on the Will Cain Show. Will Cain Show audience is scattered across every digital and terrestrial platform. We are on podcasts, Spotify and Apple. We are on YouTube and Facebook. We are on television, Fox News Channel, and we are on radio across your dial at your affiliate across this country. We'd love for you to find a way to all come together. I don't know what that is. I guess there's my social media. There's X. There's Instagram. We got to get our Facebook page up and running better and more up to date. But all I can ask is that you hang out here with us every day right now, because that comment section is the best place for all of you guys to be together right now, I would think. We got to find a way to bring everybody together. We got to find a way to tie on our redneck scarves and mount up, Willisha. What's up?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Thanks for your contribution.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Okay, yesterday, I wanted to share this with you because this did happen on terrestrial television on the Fox News channel. I got interested in this debate about this guy who organized the protests at Columbia in opposition to Israel, in support of Palestinians, and characterized by many in support of Hamas. The only reason I say that way, as characterized by many, is like the whole thing with Joey talking about Black Lives Matter and all these different cases. I don't have the facts at my ready hand of what this guy said specifically, were his calls specifically for Hamas. I do know it did go well beyond speech. I do know that they harassed students. I do know they took over government college buildings. And I do know that he's posted about ending Western civilization. He has posted that is his goal, to end Western civilization. He is a green card holder. He is a Palestinian. He's a doctoral student at Columbia. There is some reporting out there, by the way, that he had sponsored by the UK. They had a UK sponsorship for higher education to do something. There's some interesting details about who he is personally, but married to an American citizen, I believe, therefore a permanent resident. So the question is, what kind of rights does this guy have? Like, his green card has been revoked. He's been detained by ICE, and the Trump administration says they're going to deport him because he is not somebody we want in America. Others go, whoa, 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 First Amendment. One of those was Glenn Greenwald, who said, I thought we were for free speech, people on the right. The other is Brooke Goldstein, and she's saying this is not a speech issue, and we had this debate yesterday. Enjoy. Pause that real quick, two-a-days. I think that's a fair point. Jumping out of the gates, that's a fair point, and something I've always been skeptical of. Listen, everyone has to have some level of self-awareness and look themselves in the mirror. The truth is, at our base human instinct, we have a lot of things that drive us. We have fear, we have greed, we have power. This is why we need God. This is my personal opinion. This is the role of God to overcome some of these base level human instincts. And part of that is it's very hard to believe in principles because often what you want is what's best for yourself. And you believe something, then you believe in free speech when it's in your service. When you hate something, you don't believe in free speech because you don't like it. The whole point, as many people said, is I hate what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. We will let Nazis. Yes, we will let Nazis march in small town America. That is the idea of the First Amendment. I think Glenn starts out with a very fair point about hypocrisy on both sides when it comes to free speech.
Free speech, except when it comes to the ideas they most hate, which they want silenced. I just want to make one crucial point, which is you had said people on the far left, like Rashida Tlaib, believe that legal residents in the United States have the right of free speech. That is an indisputable proposition that the Supreme Court has for 200 years affirmed. And just imagine if that weren't the case. It would mean that if, say, like Jordan Peterson, who's not an American citizen but is always in the United States, were to go and denounce the Biden White House, the Biden White House could arrest him and deport him, and nobody could object on constitutional grounds because he's a foreigner. Of course, people legally in the United States have the right of free speech, and we don't want to create any kind of a framework, especially on college campuses, as the American right has been saying, where because of the argument that minority groups are endangered by certain views, black people or trans people or whatever, we have to censor those views in order to create a safe environment. And that's exactly what so many American conservatives out of great loyalty to Israel are now doing.
I appreciate you saying that and correcting me on the long-standing policy on the United States First Amendment. I also would say, in correction of myself, it's not just the far left and Rashida Tlaib. It is, as you said, principal individuals, including those on the right, that would bring up the First Amendment. However, I will now go to you, Brooke. This man was also a green card holder. That is conditional according to immigration policy. Now, what are the conditions where you can revoke someone's green card?
Right. Well, thank you, Will, for having me. I have to say at the outset that the debate about free speech here is irrelevant because Mahmoud Khalil was not detained, and he's not being threatened with deportation because of his speech. He was detained because of his conduct. He's not someone who was just standing there holding a sign that said, "I love Hamas and kill all the Jews." This is someone who is accused of engaging in a criminal conspiracy and organizing mass civil rights violations, mass trespass, assaults, destruction of property, hostile takeovers of private property and campuses. This is conduct. And so when you have
right
conduct that's indefensible,
I think it is an interesting question of when speech and conduct overlap. I mean, you protest, you march. Is that conduct or is that speech? Now, this guy has gone much further, right? And she's pointing out he did things like take over buildings. You can't take over a building and go, free speech. So she's drawing, I think, a really smart delineation here between what this guy did in any debate over free speech.
Of course, people are going to, come and start crying free speech, but Glenn is smart enough to know that this is not a speech case. There are actions here, and it's because of those actions that he is being detained, and hopefully he will be deported because he has absolutely no right to be in this country and violate the provisions of his green card, which specifically say that you cannot engage in criminal activity that endangers the public safety. And that is the activity he's engaged in. Now, he does have a due process right because, this is a democracy. We're not a dictatorship. We don't just round people up on the street and throw them out, right? He has a due process right now to challenge his detention, and the government will have to prove. They will have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that he engaged in conduct that violated his green card. So this free speech.
I should tell you guys right after this segment. Okay, you guys, James, Youngest Testament, James, and 2 days were in the studio yesterday for the show. Right after this segment, Judge Jeanine comes barreling into my studio.
Out of nowhere.
How'd she know you were there?
Out of nowhere.
There's so many studios. Boom, she's in.
She asked 100%. She was in the green room for the 5, which comes on right after my show.
Okay, yeah.
And they had the TVs on. I know how it is over there at Studio M. And they were listening. She was watching. And you can hear her losing her shit. You can hear her in your head getting mad at me, probably too, and saying this is all BS. And so she said, what studio are they in? Which, by the way, required her, it's on the same floor, but it required her to walk across the building and go through 2 security checkpoints, meaning she had to use her badge twice, to get in. And
she walks around here confidently.
And so she walked across the elevator banks, through 2 security checkpoints, into the other end of the floor, down the hallway to that studio, waited for commercial break, barrels into my studio, right? Which, just for the record, I tell you all that only for comedic purposes. I don't care. It was awesome. I like it. In fact, she texted me later, and I was like, I would not have cared if you said during the middle of the segment, I want in on this debate. I would have owned it, said, take a wide shot, and put a mic on Judge Jeanine and an IFB so she can hear these two. I would have done that, and it'd have been amazing television and a better debate for it. I would have. But she didn't. She came in afterwards to the commercial break, and she said to me, this is all nonsense. She used a word which I can't even pronounce. She goes, this is non-judiciable. Judiciable.
Habeas corpus or something.
And I said, judiciable? Judiciable? She goes, aren't you a lawyer? And I'm like,
aren't you a lawyer, Will?
I'm like, kind of. And she's like, this is not a criminal proceeding. There is no burden of the proof. There is no judge. There is no immigration judge. This is a green card holder who can have it revoked by the Secretary of State, period. Marco Rubio can say, you're gone. That's the point she wanted to make. You're caught up here. It's not free speech. It's not burden of proof. It's not an immigration judge. It is, boom, Secretary of State, gone. That's her position. It was pretty compelling. Could have just been her entrance as well. Go ahead, 2 days.
Debate is a decoy, and Glenn knows that.
Glenn?
The way criminality works in the United States is that you have to be charged with a crime and then convicted of one. Not only hasn't he ever been convicted of any crime, he's never even been charged with a crime. If he had been engaged in all this criminality and assaulting people and burning things that is being claimed, why hasn't the Trump Justice Department or the New York Police Department, which arrested hundreds of Columbia students in connection with these protests, why didn't they arrest him and charge him with these crimes? Marco Rubio, who is the Secretary of State who revoked his green card, said that the argument for revoking it is not that he committed crimes. It is that his political opinion and political activism is a danger because it does not align with American foreign policy. You have had all kinds of conservatives and Trump supporters throughout the campaign promising to come in and take all sorts of actions against people who are critics of Israel or protesting against Israel. There's obviously a huge political speech component to this case. And the solution for somebody legally in the United States who's accused of committing a crime is not to come on cable news and say, oh, they did all these crimes. It's to charge them with crimes. Right. He's not charged with any crime. He just had his visa revoked based on no process whatsoever.
That's not the evidence required under the Immigration and Nationality Act. The government has to prove by clear and convincing evidence, not that he committed a crime, but that he engaged and was convicted for it, but that he engaged in criminal activity. That is exactly what's going to happen. There's going to be a proceeding where the burden of proof is on the government now to prove that he can be deported for violating the law. And believe me, if all they have is speech, the government's not going to win. This is not a free speech debate.
And really quick, Brooke, what would be the burden of proof? What is the burden of proof to prove that he did
and
what?
Convincing evidence to prove that he engaged in actions that violated the civil rights of other Americans, that he organized and was part of a conspiracy to take over, to trespass, to destroy public property, to prevent Jewish students from entering into campus, and so on and so forth.
Short of clear and convincing evidence.
With their own eyes what happened at Columbia University. We're not stupid.
Real quick.
We can see that it was beyond speech. These criminal encampments were not just speech. They were action, they were activity, and we have absolutely every right.
Dude, that wasn't just a bark. That was a pound of dogs barking.
If anybody knows Glenn Greenwald, he's a huge dog guy.
Oh.
Huge. Like, I don't even know how I know that. Somehow. I don't think I follow him on, like, Instagram. I think he has, like, 10 dogs.
That's
like that kind of thing.
Sounded like it.
He lives in Brazil, I think. Brazil?
Fascinating.
Yeah, in Brazil. Huge dog guy. Dogs everywhere, okay? Something has set his dogs off during the middle of this segment, and here they go. And I start smiling on TV.
Was it truth set them off?
They were set off by the truth. They'd had enough of Brooke Goldstein's action. They'd had enough. The dogs are over
barking back.
So the dogs start barking. Okay, so
he lives in Rio de Janeiro, by the way.
All right, wow. I've never been to Brazil. Like to go. And so the dogs start barking. I have to own it. You can see me smiling. Roll tape.
To get people out of the country who are endangering the public safety and national security of our country.
I hear you, Brooke. I hear you.
Can you imagine the opposite?
Okay, Brooke.
Can you imagine if we weren't allowed to deport him, what this country would look like?
I hear you. I hear the clear and convincing evidence, short of a criminal conviction, that can show that you are, I believe, the standard of national security of the United States. Glenn, I hope you're unmuted. Your dogs joined the conversation for a short bit, and I appreciate their contribution. I'm going to put this last thing to you, Glenn, and it's worthy of a deeper conversation. I do worry that at some point the First Amendment, which, Glenn, I would consider myself a principled proponent of the First Amendment, and I hear, Brooke, that that's a red herring. It's not a part of this conversation. I hear you, Brooke. But I do worry that it's not a suicide pact. And we can't follow the path of Europe in having people who don't believe in the foundational elements of Western civilization and calling for the end of Western civilization, then being protected by the exact foundations of Western civilization.
No, but Will, you're advocating the European model. In Europe, ideas are banned and you can go to jail for them, and people do if you say things that the state concludes is a threat to the national order, to national security. J.D. Vance just went to Germany and cited them for having that. We don't have that tradition in the United States. We have a tradition of free speech where you're even allowed to advocate overthrow of the U.S. government, and that's how the country was founded. And the Supreme Court has repeatedly said you're even allowed to do that, and therefore, of course, you're allowed to even criticize the sacred nation of Israel.
I hear you, and by the way, you're right. What that says to me in the end is we have to be much more serious about vetting people that come into this country and being more serious about our immigration policies, because once they do, they are availed of some very serious rights here in the United States. Hey, this is a great conversation. I appreciated it, hearing both sides. I truly do. And I'm glad for this to be a venue to have this conversation. Brooke, Glenn, and Glenn's dogs, thank you for being on the Will Cain Show.
Yeah. I thought that was awesome. Not to pat myself, but I just enjoyed it. I watched the second time. I appreciate what Judge Jeanine said, that that's the debate is off of the appropriate analysis in terms of it's simply the discretion of the Secretary of State. I actually want to get to that conversation that was the last bit with me and Glenn. I think that is a serious debate. Can the tenets of Western civilization survive the attack on Western civilization? Can a society of tolerance survive an attack from intolerance? Do you have to be tolerant of intolerance? And I mean, it puts you in a very serious pickle and some serious binds when you say, we have free speech, so you can say anything you want, including that we should all kill ourselves. That's what a guy saying he wants to end Western civilization is saying. And I don't know the answer to that question. And look, I went to law school. I'm probably not as big of an expert on it as Glenn Greenwald or Brooke Goldstein, but I'm pretty good on it. I'm pretty boned up on it. It wasn't just 3 years in law school that I learned and then left it behind. I continue to keep up on First Amendment law. I continue to keep up with that stuff. And I think the only takeaway is the point I made at Glenn at the end. We can't become Europe. We can't import people who don't share these values. That's the entire thing. I have a 25-minute conversation coming up with Vivek Ramaswamy about this exact thing. What's it mean to be American? How do you become American? How do you have buy-in to the American dream? Vivek makes an interesting point. This will air later, probably early next week here on the show. So go subscribe on Spotify and Apple so you don't miss it. 25 minutes with Vivek on this. Vivek goes, you and I can move to Italy and spend the entire rest of our lives in Italy. We'll never be Italians. We can move to Spain and do the same thing. We'll never be Spaniards. There are very few countries where you can move and become something, but you can become something in America. Then the question is, how? How do you become American? It's not simply a passport, green card, or I would even offer a citizenship document. You have to buy into the idea of what it is to be an American. Otherwise, I don't think you belong. I'm going to be blunt. I don't think you belong in America. All right, that's going to do it for us today here on The Will Cain Show. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, I hope you'll share it with your friends. Hit a 5-star review. Send it far and wide. We will see you again next time.